one backdrop. So we see here the hands creating the universe. And it's a really cool picture, but it's something we're going to address because it kind of, I don't know that many of us would agree that it would look like this. So I'll just say it that way. And it's important because we've reached now to, we started with science, and you don't have to watch the other video that really showed what I'm about to recap here. But if anything I recap doesn't sit well with you, by all means, go to the video that shows how science is founded on logic and not the other way around. But science founded on logic. Logic is a philosophical construct. So science is based on philosophy, and that's where we get somebody can have a doctorate in the science of something, a PhD in whatever science. So science is built on philosophy, and very much so on logic, because that's part of philosophy. And then all of that, though, is actually founded upon imagination. And that's what really, really can blow your mind. Because children, we look at how children have these crazy imaginations, and we think of imagination as something that just goes out there and whatever. And it's a good thing we have logic, because otherwise we'd be left to our imagination. We don't think about this, that logic is rooted in it, that you can't have logic without imagination. Whether it's my imagination or someone else's, you must have imagination from someone somewhere in order to pursue a logical thought, in order to even come up with the whole philosophy of logic. People had to use imagination. They had to propose things, think through things, compare things, and determine things. And the imagination was required to discover it. And that's a discovery, not an invention. No one invented the proper mechanisms that just show you how to get to truth. So that's the other thing that showed that everything points to absolute truth, because you couldn't have the patterns we see everywhere, the systems that are in place, the cycles that are in place, all of these required for life, this complicated network. And this network, think about on that term, is when I say network, it's not this, it's related to that, and that's related to that, and it just goes linear. It's this requires this, meshed together, that requires that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that's all meshed together. There's like things firing off, kind of like neurons firing off in your brain all over the place. They're all required the way they are in order to give us what we have. So that's pretty important. So the imagination helps me even see that. I could not communicate that without seeing it first. And I didn't see it anywhere around in front of me. I saw it from my imagination. Anything that has value is going to come from there. For instance, if I'm going to create something, say a construction project, I'm going to use my imagination to do it. And yes, I'm going to employ logic for sure, or it's not going to succeed. But even prior to logic, concept, have a concept, a vision of some sort, and then I'm going to reason through the process. Why do I want this? What's the goal? What's the overall vision of it? And then how do I get there? Logic. And then, engineering, a science based upon logic, highly highly based on logic. Much logic goes into it, and then so without going indefinite on that, I think it's pretty clear. So imagination. So likewise, God created the universe in a similar fashion, and we'll go on that in the Bible study. But the setup of Elohim, divine counsel, Yahweh Elohim, the center part of the divine council. We usually call him our Father. The replicative process, so going from something that's conceptual into manifestation, and his construction process, essentially taking us in, the souls that he's created and have taken in spirit, and he's gathered together as resources towards a project, and that project being one family, one integrated family. So it's kind of the same process I was talking about a minute ago, just how the imagination works in construction. But also, God's done it even in our chemistry. The DNA, again, that root, like our Father, the root of all creation. He's DNA, and then DNA to RNA. It's like the word coming forth. So the Father's will through the word comes forth. Before the word is spoken, one with the Father is spoken forth, and now is essentially carrying everything of the Father's will into this universe. And so it's kind of like DNA, RNA, and RNA beginning this process where coming forth from the DNA with a mission, and then gathering amino acids, and in this case, gathering those that are going to be part of everlasting life, those who will take their place on the bus. And, it's the same way this works with the collecting all the amino acids in order to synthesize protein. And in our case, it's and protein is that life-giving thing that we all need for all the different functions we have. And so again, it's also shown in our own chemistry, where just like that happens, we also are gathered in and in order, in a very, very methodic order that our Father has in heaven. And then we're brought in and have everlasting life. And we'll carry on in whatever He's got in store for us. So, all that works the same. All right, so we're going to move forward from there. I think it's important too. So several things work that same way. I'm just staying with those because those alone are pretty magnificent. But reproduction cycle and different things could be. We could do the same thing. It is amazing. So there's an author of it, and that's why we see so many things work same way. But let's go into. We talked about how logic, the imagination employs logic, and one thing I didn't go into too strongly is that logic is evidence of absolute truth, because every logical premises is a truth statement. It's either true or false. Whether it's, if you have a sentence and you have an error in the sentence, use the rules of logic, exposes the error in the sentence, and now you have a false claim, false premise. Now, perhaps you could remove what makes it false and get it to be a true premise, but you've got to analyze it and do those things in order to line up, be in harmony with the truth that it's supposed to point to. And if truth is required to build the premise, and the premise is working towards a true conclusion, then logic is trapped between truth. Truth is an evaluation of truth that links what's before it to what's after it, so that it's in harmony with wherever that truth is heading and wherever it came from. So we see that truth is all the way in a from, all the way to, right? So and we know that it's not just a construct of the imagination, that it's real, because I can take one apple plus one apple and I have two apples, and I could play those games all day long to show how, when the facts line up, you can certainly predict the conclusion without a problem. It's the predictive nature of truth. That's another thing. The fact that we can predict anything shows there's truth. Truth has to exist, and it must be something that is objective. It's not subjective to my view. It is something that everybody can come to independently, whether they share my views or not. So yeah, that's the way of saying truth is the foundation of logic. So we could say logic, philosophy, truth, and then imagination. Actually, it'd be imagination and truth is an underlying. Imagination has to come out of truth. Some imagination is not true, so that's how we know the order. Imagination can be true or false, therefore truth is first. Imagination goes on it, logic goes on it, etc. All right. Truth is prerequisite. No math can come without it, no science. You can't have anything with pattern prediction. So yeah, math and science, and so even grammar. Think on this for a second, because this is just going to the logic level. So grammar is a logical. It comes out of logic, because you have letters that have to be arranged a certain way in order to represent certain words, ideas, and those words are placed a certain way in order to have a coherent paragraph, a sentence actually, and then paragraph, and then so on and so forth. So it's really amazing how we integrate all this and we take it for granted. Think even in business, if there's no truth and therefore no logic, then we have another problem, because we can't have any bookkeeping. We can't have anything to evaluate where our business might be, whether it profits or doesn't. It either does, which is a truth or false, or it doesn't, which is true or false. So, very important to our day-to-day life. And again, something we just take for granted all the time. So from the imagination, like I said before, there's truth. So truth, imagination, philosophy, logic, science, etc. So, but let's start with truth, imagination. Let's go to that level of it, I guess. From the imagination, sometimes we don't find everything on truth, and we can end up with a worldview. So imagination, philosophy can branch off with some logic in it, with some of this and that, into a worldview. But the worldview has errors in it because some of our logic wasn't right. We let weeds into the logic. All of that probably stemmed from an imagination that kind of formed a different narrative, its own concept or vision of the way things work. So it skewed the logic that direction. That's like all of us have to fight that battle. And of course, we call these things bias, and we act as if science somehow Scientists do not have the bias, but of course they do, because the bias was way precedent, way before the science. Went all the way down to philosophy, imagination. So speculative things that got mixed in with the real science, of course that's going to happen. It would be foolish to try to think that that doesn't happen. It would be amazing if it didn't happen. It happens in a big way, and of course in the past we've seen it, and we can joke about perpetual motion. Um, we can joke about how maggots were supposed to be proof that spontaneous generation, and even the Stanley Miller experiment where he was supposed to show how living things can come about from non-living, and he admitted later that it was a hoax, that he set up the conditions to do some things, but it really wasn't what it appeared to be. So you have all these things here that it's very important the logic is sound. It's very important that we understand that we look for where these weeds might come in. And so let's keep going here. So the big problem, and I want to be clear, again, science on the operative mechanical side, the engineering side, is very helpful. And it's the way that science comes to be, a lot of the weeds get zapped out because the weeds will be exposed by things that either work or don't work. Okay? It's the speculative side that is hard to ever expose, hard to ever see, because it's very easy to just jump around on it. It's like the child that tells a story and his imagination, every time the truth tries to mess something up and what he's trying to tell you, he can back up for a second and figure out a way around it. And in the end, the story is convoluted, doesn't sound like the same story he started with too much, but he's got around a lot of problems. And if he's a genius and he's got thousands of other geniuses with him, that story's gonna be hard to poke any holes in, no matter how false it is. And that is evolution. And I'll get to that. That's not just something I'm saying and you're supposed to just go with it. It's going to be easy to expose here in a minute. All right. Of course, molecular biologists have come out, cosmologists have come out, people have come out from all over the place. It's geneticists especially, and astronomers have come. So many have come out, geologists, exposing so many problems in the whole idea on evolution. But I'm not even going to have to go to any of that. I mean, they all make great points, valid points, but again, you get into this debate where somebody just changes things some to get around, right? And the same thing the other way. From the creationist side, if somebody thinks they can tell you exactly how it all happens, most likely they're playing that same game. So I'm not going to say that's 100% the case. That gift could be on somebody somewhere. I haven't run across that, but I've heard some very good, insightful things from people. But when you try to put the whole thing together, we're probably missing some pieces. All right, so especially when you just take quantum mechanics, set it to the side, and try to do it all through what yeah, there's going to be issues. Okay. Okay. So, what is our main issue that we're gonna look at the foundation where science has the biggest problem, where evolution can be blown apart? How? It's pretty simple. So we're going back down the rules here. Science all the way through these different channels. Imagination. Imagination must be based on truth. Anything that's true, it can go through the imagination through the right cycle, or it can go through the imagination somewhere else, right? It can even borrow from logic to try to make a case the wrong way. All that can happen. But here's where science makes the biggest mistake. I should be clear again. Not science in general, speculative, anything that incorporates speculation. We weren't there at the very beginning. We have to speculate to some degree, whether we're taking different ideas about how old the world must be, how it must have operated at different points in time. We're taking things that we can see and we're using our imagination and what we know to try to place them somewhere. But if somebody has me close my eyes and they move a quarter through the house or whatever, and then say, okay, open your eyes and tell me how the quarter got from here to there, I would try to be logical and just say, well, when I closed my eyes, you took the quarter and you walked over there and you put it down. And you waited for a while and said, how did it get here? When really, maybe along the way, was bringing the quarter, somebody bumped into them, dropped the quarter, picked it up, different things happened, and finally it reaches that destination. I missed everything, really. So all the correct things that get something from here to there, and I'm assuming everything in between. And if I didn't have a time element there, if somehow they could freeze time for me, I'd probably get the time wrong. If maybe they traveled around the world a few times and then placed it over there. And then I'm thinking it happened in 3 seconds and it took 10 years, whatever. In other words, imagination is a great tool, but speculation is not necessarily the best friend of the truth. They can become friends if truth, imagination, incorporates speculation, but through sound logic, tests different things and continues to move forward. But once we got to understand, we got to know, hey, you know what? A lot of what I'm incorporating is speculation, so I'm not going to bring that into. That's not science. That's speculation. Now, it may be speculation with a lot of evidence that I see to me belongs with it, and maybe to 1 million other people, we all agree, didn't make us right, just made a million of us have the same worldview, accept the same set of facts the same way. That's all it really did. Don't underestimate the power of the worldview and a shared worldview, especially if billionaires like that concept, will feed it money, give people scholarships in order to further its cause, promote the people who push that idea, especially if you have that. And what billionaire doesn't like the idea of survival of the fittest? That the one on top got there because he's the best of the best, rather than somebody stepped on everybody, maybe killed some people along the way, whatever, and got to where they got. Yeah, that's not the way they want you to see that, for sure. So you gotta be careful with evolution. It's and I guess I should say I haven't even gotten to the best part of this. Okay, so back on down the line again. Okay, imagination. How important the imagination is. Now, picture this. I come out as a proud scientist, and I have said, philosophy is dead, science killed it. All right, and here's how. And then I go into it. And by the way, I would have done that, undermining the very foundation of science. Philosophy is the foundation of science. So that's an invalid claim. Likewise, science itself makes a claim. Its only realm, it's a pretty small realm, really. We treat it like it's the universe. It's really a small realm that science fits in. Science is there where things can be observed, tested, falsifiable. There's a very strict set of rules for things that belong in the scientific realm. It excludes supernatural. That doesn't mean that if it's supernatural, it's untrue. That means it's not in this little realm of science. So it's not something that man can test, falsify, this, that, and the other. It either doesn't exist or it's superior to it. It's just otherwise. I'll just say this: we're going to show it's superior. I'm going to bypass all the ifs. So, science is based on logic. Logic is a philosophical construct. Philosophy comes out of imagination, but what is imagination? What is even the truth that imagination is on? What is that stuff? Imagination. Already mentioned earlier, it's invisible. And it's the driver of neurons. Neurons don't make it. Neurons are driven by it. So neurons do, if neurons could drive imagination, then somebody's got to explain how that happens. There's far too much information to believe that.